Thank you, Blair. I love that joy song. Boy, that's one you can sing in your car, right? Driving home, singing that, because we open our minds, we open our hearts with the miracles, because miracles exist beyond duality. They exist in the infinite realm of God in possibility. So, who's ready for a miracle? Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. So what if your miracle involved a cat? This was one woman's experience. I don't know if you heard about this story of an 83-year-old woman in Cornwall, England, who was making the rounds on her farm, and she'd been missing for about an hour, so her neighbors were worried, and they called, for emergency services. So the police were out looking, combing her land, looking, and some volunteers too. And it was one of the volunteers who heard something that no one else noticed. The loud meowing of a cat. And so the volunteer went to the cat and looked down this ravine, and there was the woman lying in a little shallow stream. So the rescuers kind of went down the cliff, put her on a stretcher, came back, they flew her to the hospital, and she was last reported in stable condition, thanks to her faithful cat. And the person who was present and open to possibility that the cat could be part of this. That the cat was part of this scene. So how are you doing with opening to new possibilities? Will you look at your cat in a different way when you go home today? Or maybe cat has already informed you of their abilities. Kind of like a feline lassie, So that's what we're about this month, miracles. And considering that we are given in a year 525,600 minutes in a year, and the same number of potentials for a miracle, choice by choice, moment by moment. And it starts up here, doesn't it? So that's why we work with embracing ideas, higher ideas of God presence, God power, who we truly are as beloved creations of a loving Creator that helps us then go out into the world, which may be like a tilt-a-whirl carnival sometimes, but to keep our groundedness and steadiness so we can act from that place, so we can be the presence, be the calm, be the love, even whether we speak or not, because that energy speaks. Your energy speaks and blesses. So we're looking at how to create conditions for a miracle, and using the story of the loaves and fishes story from the book of Matthew. So I'd just like to recap that scriptural story a little bit here. And we remember that Jesus had just heard the news of the execution, really, of his cousin, John the Baptist. So he went off by himself to pray. And he went off in a boat, and when the people saw him coming to shore, they flocked to him. They flocked to him, and Jesus had compassion for them and cured their sick. And then he told the disciples to feed them, but the disciples say, we only have, a little bit here. We only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus ordered the disciples to bring the food. Then he instructed the crowd to sit down on the grass. And he held the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looked to heaven, blessed, and then broke the loaves. Gave them to the disciples, who then gave them to the crowd. And we read that all ate and were filled, and there was lots of leftovers. And so Jesus sent the disciples ahead. He dismissed the crowd, and he went off by himself up the mountain to pray. prayer before the action, taking action, prayer after the action. That's a good pattern there. So from the work of Dr. Michael Abrams and his 12 conditions for a miracle, we learn that there are layers of meaning within this story that Dr. Abrams actually believes are actual instructions that Jesus left for us around miracle creation. So last week we looked at 3 of these conditions, which were maximizing the resources and attitudes we have and blessing what we do have, considering what's good and what's working, instead of complaining, right? And then we looked at giving fully and freely without expectation of return, creating a vacuum and opening a space for God's good to show up. I read one friend I know, Facebook friend I know, he works at a grocery store, and he talked about this woman just being so distraught yesterday that she had locked her keys in her car. And so he's like a touchy-feely guy. He says, "Would you like a hug?" And she said, "No, but I would like to use your phone." So he gave her his phone, and she got help from her, AAA or whatever, to come with the car. And when she handed, so he went back to work and just let her, use the phone. And so she was so grateful when she handed his phone back, just thanked him profusely for it. And then he says his shift was over, he was getting a few groceries and, in line, and the person behind him said, a stranger, "I've got his tab, just put it on mine." Isn't that instant blessing, coming around when we give fully and freely, opening that flow for unexpected good, expected good and unexpected good. Maybe also you heard the story of the Jamaican gold medalist who got lost on the bus in Tokyo and almost didn't make his event. And he realized he was going to be late, and there was no time to get on another bus. And so he met this stranger who, they stopped the bus and he got in a taxi. She paid for his taxi fare so he would make it to the event. And he ended up having enough time to warm up, stretch, and then won the gold for his country. Hansel Parchment, his name. And so the story doesn't stop there. After his gold medal, he found the woman again, showed and thanked her profusely, showed her his medal, gave her a jersey. She also got an invitation to vacation in Jamaica. So she gave without thinking. I also paid her back for the taxi fare too. So we talked a little bit earlier about how miracles can start with a change of heart in somebody's heart that just ripples out as a blessing, as a blessing. Somebody's praying for a miracle today, and your kind action might be that you might think it's small, but it might be huge for them, huge for them. So we're tuning into those moments, those miracle moments, and how we can be part of that. So we looked at maximizing giving and grounding in God mind, so we may be a vessel for the divine to flow. So we do this in different ways, in prayer, in meditation, in singing, music, nature. That's one of my favorite ways, to go into a cathedral of trees or on the beach. Very soothing, very grounding. I like what Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, says about miracles in consciousness. The first miracle in our consciousness is transforming the water of thought into the wine of thought. through introducing into consciousness some of the angels of God, or true ideas. So those divine ideas, I like that image. It's not a great image that they're angels of God, these divine ideas that come to us. You know? And when I read this, I thought, you know, Charles, maybe there's a little step before this, because sometimes there's the mud of thought. Or just so muddled and feel stuck, and you know, we go to prayer, ask for prayer help, get centered so that mud can settle down and we can get clear. And then there's the water of thought. So that's the wine of thought, W-I-N-E, wine of thought. So let's bring our wine consciousness to the next three conditions. Next three conditions of creating a miracle are seeing, gratitude, and acting as if. So if you've been in Unity or New Thought for a while, you maybe have had a lot of practice with this, right? Who's been practicing this a lot? Yeah. And we know this too, but sometimes we forget, right? So it's good to remember, oh yeah, I know how to do that. So we return to the scene in the loaves and fishes story where Jesus is holding the food and looking up to heaven. And with this action, he's restoring vision. And looking to heaven, he's seeing the desired end. So we remember that Unity teaches about the law of mind action, that when we see things clearly and feel into the energy of what we're envisioning and acting as if it has already happened, we become conscious co-creators with infinite spirit, with the universal substance, which one of my mentors calls the invisible cookie dough. It's there. What shape are we putting around it? What are we drawing forth? We do that with our thoughts, our feelings, persistent thought and feeling. I can remember when I bought my house back in Sacramento a couple of decades ago, and I would do this every night. I would picture myself standing at the door of this house, putting the key in the lock, and opening the door and stepping over the threshold and saying, "Oh, I'm home." I would just repeat that over and over. Because there's a part of our brain that doesn't know time, it doesn't know past, it doesn't know future, it's always now. So we can feel into, think into, imagine into what we want to step into in our lives. Who else has had that experience where you have visualized, you have felt? Yeah, I see a lot of heads nodding, hands up, yeah. So to practice that this week, what is your longing? And what is your heart longing to co-create with God that you can sit with this week and imagine into, think of, feel into, have gratitude for, give thanks in advance? Dr. Abrams, remember he's a medical doctor, and he tells a powerful story about seeing. He writes about one of his patients who was brought to the emergency room, and she said she had a blood clot in one of her coronary arteries, and even though he did everything he could medically as a doctor, her condition continued to deteriorate, and she became unconscious, and death seemed imminent. Well, he'd already developed the 12 conditions of creating a miracle, and as he started to review them, and he thought, okay, knowing that her healing was now in God's hands. But as he reviewed them a little closely, he realized, oops, I forgot one. And he'd been so caught up in his medical training and medical answers and indicators that pointed to her death that the one condition he skipped over was seeing the desired results, seeing her whole and healthy. So in that moment, he set aside all his medical knowledge, and Dr. Abrams held an image of this woman, whole and healthy, and released it to the universe. He reports that within 15 seconds, his patient was conscious and talking to him. He shares this. An important part of our whole purpose as human beings is to learn how to see the best even when the worst transpires in livid detail before our very eyes. So that's been a practice, isn't it? It's an ongoing practice, right? A lot going on in world news, in our country, and this is a good element to practice with whatever has really touched your heart this week, whether it's something personally or someone in your family, something in the news that just kind of grabbed your heart. To practice the seeing the desired results. How would it look if this were resolved? How would it look if this was healed? What would it look like? What would it sound like? To put energy into that vision. So our next two conditions of a miracle are found in this scene of the loaves and fishes story. After Jesus looked up to heaven, he blessed and broke the loaves. So we know when we bless something, we are praising and speaking well of it and seeing the good that's already present, as well as giving thanks for it. To appreciate something, that word appreciate means to rise in value. We're seeing the good in it. So this next condition of a miracle is gratitude. Gratitude. So I realize as we're going through this, a lot of this is not new to you, but we're hearing it in a different way, right? And sometimes it can hit us in a new way, hearing these concepts in a different way. I like this from Eric Butterworth. The grateful heart is a dynamic key to personal prosperity. As you feel grateful, you become attractive, not only in your beauty and radiance, but in your relationship with people. More importantly, you release a vital energy that draws to you opportunities, employment, and a secure flow of substance. Magnetic. Gratitude is a magnet for good. So gratitude comes first, next, and last. So the last condition of a miracle we're looking at today comes from the scene in Loaves and Fishes where Jesus blesses the bread and breaks it open. And when he broke the loaf, he is acting as if the miracle has already occurred. He breaks it open, sends it out to be shared. So in breaking the bread, Jesus breaks through limiting consciousness. And that Christ consciousness in us also breaks through limitation. This starts the cycle in motion. So acting as if the miracle has already occurred. Jesus didn't wait for the bread and fish to multiply. He didn't sit there tapping his foot saying, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?" He fed the people for what we have. We laugh, but don't we do that sometimes, Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Just pushing that all aside and working with what we have in the moment, starting from where we're at. My daughter started a YouTube channel and she was a little nervous. I said, "Honey, everyone who starts something new, Don't expect it to be perfect. You're going to learn as you go. It'll be perfect for starting, and you can always put more and improve. It's a learning process. You know, we're going to start with what we have. Dr. Abrams says, the universe funnels its energy into the lives of those who act, those who work, those who make an effort to actually get things accomplished. So we take action. The universe responds. You know, no more sitting there just on the couch watching TV waiting for Ed McMahon to show up with that giant check. Does he still do that? I don't know. No. We take the steps, right? That's why we go to prayer, to be guided. Like, what is mine to do here? What is my step to take? And sometimes when we're breaking open the bread of our consciousness and our lives, as well as the good stuff showing up, healing, prosperity, jobs, relationships, more joy, more friends, some surprising things can show up. And I will call this surprising thing temporary. Unity writer H.M. Lee Cady had a word for it, chemicalization, she called it. Have you heard that before? Chemicalization. And this is when we're consciously working, and a higher divine idea meets an established pattern, a lower vibrational thought or belief or pattern, and stuff breaks apart. Stuff just bubbles up. Emotions can bubble up. Bodily pings and pangs. And strange things in our environment. For example, I have one friend, every time she goes through we call it a spiritual growth spurt, that things in her house quit on her. The clock suddenly doesn't work. The toaster, the washing machine once. Has anyone else experienced something like that? Yeah, I see a few hands. The energy shifts and something happens there. So these shifts can be unsettling, but, and you may think, what have I gotten myself into? The old way of thinking might not have been the best, but at least it was predictable. So there may be a temptation to slip back into old habits of thinking and doing out of fear. However, if this happens to you, it doesn't happen to everybody, but if it does happen to you, know that it too will pass as your body, your mind, your psyche, your energy body adjusts to a new way of thinking and being. So self-care is really important here. So even when stuff bubbles up, we're encouraged with the 9th condition of a miracle, to act as if our desired outcome is already happening. Fake it till you make it, or faith it till you make it, right? So in our loaves and fishes miracle story, we see the template for creating conditions for a miracle that we can practice as well. As Jesus goes off by himself to pray, empties out his consciousness of ego demands, we too can spend our time apart in prayer to make that a priority. To come in alignment with the infinite flow as Jesus did as well. To ask. Jesus maximized what was given to him with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, so we can also maximize what we have right here, right now. And he asked the crowds to sit down and become grounded, thus providing a vacuum for receiving. So when those active thoughts start to roam around, those crowd of thoughts, we can have them sit down, quiet down, and be open to receiving. And so as he saw the blessing as if it has already occurred, giving thanks and acting as if. We can too. Work with that this week, seeing the blessing as if it has already occurred, because it does exist in potentiality. In potentiality, it does exist. And so we are focusing on it to draw it from potential to form. And that takes persistence. Persistence. So let's close with some affirmations. I am healed, I am prosperous, I am whole. Together, I am healed, I am prosperous, I am whole. I am loving and lovable. I am loving and lovable. I am guided by the highest wisdom. I am guided by the highest wisdom. I am supported by the highest love. I am supported by the highest love. So we say, thank you, God. And so it is.
Thank you, God.
So it is. Amen.